You are listening to The World As I See It podcast. 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 As I see it podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The World As I See It podcast. This is episode 56. And for the next 3 episodes, we are going to be taking a fascinating look back in time. And we are going to explore how blind and low vision people navigated education, reading and writing in the past before Braille was ever invented. And today I want to answer a question that you may not think about. What was life like before Braille was invented? How did blind people read and write 200 or even 300 years ago? Today, we take refreshable Braille displays. I know I do, but I take refreshable Braille displays, screen readers, and audiobooks for granted. But back in the 1700s and 1800s, that didn't exist. And to really understand how revolutionary Braille became, we have to look at what came before it. So, for hundreds of years, society, they really didn't have an organized system for educating blind people. Sighted educators, they just assumed that the only way for a blind person to read was to feel a tactile version of the standard print alphabet. And so, in 1784, Valentin Haüy opened the first school for the blind youth in Paris. It was called the Royal Institute for Blind Youth. So his idea was to press thick, wet paper heavily onto metal shapes of the regular letters to create raised print. Over in Scotland during the 1820s and 1830s, printers, they tried similar ideas. James Gall in Edinburgh created the triangular alphabet. Basically, it modified capital letters into sharp angular shapes. John Alston in Glasgow created Alston Type using raised capital Roman letters, which I thought was interesting. In 1832, this was very interesting, but Royal Scottish Society of the Arts, they actually held a nationwide competition with a gold medal prize for whoever could invent the ultimate raised alphabet. I was like, that's very interesting. Now, I don't know who won that, but imagine trying to read a whole book where every single letter is raised off the page in capital letters or sharp angles. You would have to trace the curve or angle of every single letter with the tip of your finger just to figure out a single word. Now, I'm pretty sure that reading this way was pretty painfully slow, and I'm sure exhausting. Tracing lines, it isn't natural. And your fingers, I feel like they would get tired fast. And these books were enormous and expensive. This shocked me, but a short story could fill multiple heavy volumes. Just a short story. And writing? Yeah. Here's the thing about writing. Writing was almost impossible to do independently. A student had to use a pencil guided by a grooved frame, but here's the bad thing about that. They could never reread or edit what they had just written without, if they needed to rewrite something, they would have to rely on somebody to go, okay, I need you to reread this so I can edit it. And that's just not the best solution. However, raised print, it wasn't the only experiment. In 1845, an English printer named Dr. Williams Moon created a system called Moon Type, or Moon Code. Hey, that's actually a pretty fun name. So Dr. Moon, he lost his sight as an adult, he realized that full Roman letters, it was too complex for touch, especially for adults who lost their vision later in life and they lacked the sensitive touch perception. So he created a simplified tactile system based on 9 basic raised shapes, using bold lines, curves, and angles that represented print letters. And Moon Type, it sounds easier than raised print, and it was. It was much easier to learn than raised print. And for a long time, it became a massive success across the UK and the world for adults, And here's the thing. Even though Moon Type was easier to read than raised print letters, it still had one major drawback. Like raised print, it was almost you couldn't write with it. It was almost impossible for a blind person to write independently using the stylus. The world was still waiting for a code that allowed both reading and independent writing. And that's where this episode ends. But next week in episode 57, we will look at how military night writing and a brilliant 12-year-old boy named Louis Braille changed everything forever. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 56. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment, drop a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and share it with a friend. As always, you can reach out to me at theworldasiseitpodcast@gmail.com. Stay curious, keep listening, and I will talk to you in episode 57.
You've been listening to the World as I See It podcast.